and he's going to house it.
It's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football, sports betting, and NASCAR home. I am your host, Kyle Robert. You follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me, as always, it's Brian Swining. What's up, Brian?
Well, what's up, Kyle? Yeah, I'm excited for today's show. We finally get a third voice who could be able to be the voice of reason between you and I, always arguing about our picks. But I'm excited for this race in New Hampshire. Xfinity race was pretty exciting. Qualifying was pretty damn surprising, to say the least. So yeah, I'm excited to jump into this.
Yeah, and I think we got a few things from the Xfinity race, too, that we can talk about for Sunday. But let's bring in our guest. You hear him on the NASCAR show with Todd Fuhrman. It's Chris Werme. What's up, Chris?
Hey, Kyle. Hey, Brian. How's it going?
What's up?
Good. Happy to have you. Happy to have a third person to kind of tell us how confused we are. But let's jump into it. And Chris, before we dive in, and we'll obviously run through the betting board as always, hit props, hit outrights, hit all those. In terms of New Hampshire, what are you thinking about? Is there any specifics you're taking away? Any recent form, especially with the new car in 2022? How are you using some of the previous history as a way of kind of jumping off as we head into Sunday's race?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at Phoenix and Richmond, not so much Gateway, just because Gateway doesn't have the tire fall off that you see at Phoenix and Richmond, where Loudon you actually do see a little bit more fall off. I think that maybe next year I would look maybe more at Gateway if this Loudon race does kind of follow the same flow of a race. But when it comes to recent form, I think it's really, really hard to look at recent form because those tracks, you're looking at two road course races and a restrictor plate race. So, Nashville would be kind of the first recent oval speed you could look at. So it's kind of a weird point in the season.
Yeah.
But definitely Phoenix and Richmond.
Yeah, I think those are two of the ones we've been kind of gravitating towards. And obviously, as you mentioned, the road courses don't really apply quite as much. But let's pull up the old betting board here. Let's look at where the odds are moving and kind of where we're sitting as of post qualifying, and you'll see some movement. It's pretty interesting. We have some legitimate movement, Brian. We have Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson, William Byron. It's really interesting. There's kind of a cluster. I know in previous races we've kind of had pretty good tiers of who's sitting where, and obviously Truex is your favorite is sitting on the pole rather. Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch are your co-favorites, but they're all kind of clustered together. I guess post qualifying, Brian, is there a name in this chunk that's kind of jumping out to you, or showing, even though they're priced efficiently here, perhaps somebody you're avoiding?
Just first off the bat, like for qualifying, prior to qualifying, we were talking about the odds that they were kind of set with the expectation that Chevrolet hasn't performed good at all at this track. They had won one of the last 15 races here. So It is interesting to see a couple of Chevrolet guys, Larson, Elliott, and Byron, sitting amongst those first like six in terms of odds. Elliott is a guy who we talked about this earlier in the week. Like, he's probably the hottest driver in the circuit right now. It's kind of hard to get off of him, but that 7-1 number is a little bit too short for me. I do think it's interesting that Truex was able to jump that high. He's a great driver. Toyota's looked fantastic today, both practice and qualifying, but I don't know if I can trust betting him at such a short number when we really haven't seen that kind of performance out of him this season.
Yeah, it's really an interesting betting board this week. Obviously, the Toyotas looked great today, qualifying in 4 of the top 5 spots, with obviously Chase Elliott being the 5th car. Chris, what are you looking at and kind of taking away as the board has shifted? Is there anyone in this range in terms of outrights you're looking to target or looking to fade?
Well, I think at this point, Kyle Busch was pretty dominant. It seemed like in like the 5:15 and kind of 20 lap averages. And what did he open the week at? Like 9-1. I think he was bet down to 7. You see him look really, really good in practice. Qualified really poorly, like shockingly poor. And to see that number stay, DraftKings offering 8-1.
Yep.
I mean, I see immediate value there. I know he's the favorite in Vegas at a few respectable shops. So I think that you could see some value on Kyle Busch, but ultimately, I mean, he's starting deep in the pack. So I don't know if you like to live bet, you might want to wait just to make sure that he has the car underneath him. I mean, I know that I was high on him at Sonoma, and the first thing he said is when he got on the track on Sunday, he said, I don't know. This isn't even the same car I drove yesterday. So I'm almost hesitant to back him before the race. I might just wait to look live. But I think Kyle is probably the best value I see at this area on the odds board.
Yeah, it's interesting. He's definitely someone that books aren't afraid to price a little shorter than maybe his qualifying position would dictate. Brian, and obviously when we flip over and talk DraftKings later, probably will be somebody that we gravitate towards starting where he is starting. But yeah, I'm kind of with you guys. Obviously, the Chase Elliott has been on fire, and it's always an easy target in this range. Kyle Busch at 8-1, especially with the his number shrinking everywhere else, is a pretty solid value. And as Chris mentioned, targeting him live, maybe he starts a little slow, or maybe that first stage he just kind of sits mid pack, and you can still get that number, or maybe a little bit better. We can keep it rolling. Brian, I do have that 12-1 as well as you have that 12-1 on Kyle Larson. Qualified strong, starting in the top 10. I have no reason to kind of fade him there. As we dip into kind of this second range of names, pretty interesting movement. And Chris, I'll let you speak to Kevin Harvick, somebody that you mentioned to us before the show that you're very excited about this week. His number has shrunken pretty significantly.
Yeah, I was pretty high on Harvick coming into the week because I did not include Gateway as a track that I looked at where he performed pretty poorly, but he definitely performed at both Richmond and Phoenix. And when he opened at 20, I was kind of excited about that. And then there was another, I think he opened at 25 at Circa. So we kind of jumped on that. And, I was happy to see him qualify. I mean, he qualified 10th, which for him is actually pretty good, but he also backed off in his qualifying lap and didn't even run. And because I was thinking to myself, what's the worst case scenario here? He's in the the finals of qualifying. The worst case is he pulls a Josh Berry and he has to go to the rear, because I think he's going from the back to the front these days is not what it used to be. No. So I was just happy that he just decided to finish off the qualifying. I think that even 15-1, I think that's a great price. I don't know if he does have that race winning speed, but if there is a little bit of strategy involved, he was able to work his way up there. He was pretty fast in Nashville, and then obviously had a great finish at Richmond with the tire strategy.
And Brian, Harvick's been somebody that we've kind of been, especially as of late, been interested in more of like top 5s, top 10s. Usually you can get pretty decent numbers. But has, in terms of outrights, we tend to fade him just because he feels like that guy who's going to be third and not first. But in terms of track history, obviously at New Hampshire, has had a nice run, had a good run at Phoenix in the next gen car, including he was third after stage 2, ended up finishing 6th, but overall a really strong run for him. He is somebody that I could see us looking as we look into the odds for top 5, top 10, maybe getting there again. Obviously, I think I have a fade on him from pre-qualifying, but we can talk about that driver as we go along. But I guess other names in this range, including, we talked about Eric Almirola, Brian, as somebody who, obviously won here last year. We kind of thought might do pretty well, despite not having the greatest year. And he qualified 7th, looked pretty fast, and his number is shrinking, kind of clustering up with the Chastain, with Christopher Bell, with Kevin Harvick. I guess what are your takeaways from here? And is Almirola somebody that you could find yourself gravitating towards?
I mean, I think just kind of in the same breath, the way that I feel about Kevin Harvick is just I have not seen enough from either of those two guys to want to go, especially to like that 15-1 with Harvick or even 18-1 with Almirola. I like him a little bit more in like the top 10 market. Personally, for me, I think the guy with the most value at this like point of the draft board, or the odds board, it's got to be Ross Chastain, 15-1 at a guy who's running inside the top 10, top 5. He's done that 10 times this year. And something that Chris had mentioned prior to us recording, like, can't really look too much at like past races, even like the previous years, just because the car's different. And then really only looking at Phoenix and Richmond. And I mean, you're looking at Chastain, he finished runner up at Phoenix earlier on this year. Guy is running near the front at every single track. I don't, practice, I think it was like 12th fastest. Qualifying, he didn't do great, but you can kind of throw that out the window for me. Trackhouse as a team has done a really good job of kind of adjusting their cars from Saturday into Sunday and race day. And I think Chastain's the kind of guy 15-1 who could potentially pop here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really strong number, and obviously, I believe it was like 10-12 when we talked.
Yeah, it was around 10, I think,
on Wednesday. So that's some extra value on a guy that we definitely feel has potential this week. We liked him coming into the week, and obviously, yeah, he wasn't as strong in qualifying, but if that gets us a few extra points in the betting market, I think it's worthwhile. Chris, is there any? Go ahead. Brian.
Sorry, I'd be remiss to not mention Christopher Bell sitting at 12-1 or 14-1. It's just not a number I think I could ever get to at this point.
Yeah, every week we talk about it, Brian. He's somebody that we wish we could buy in on before qualifying and then sell short after qualifying, because he always seems to do well. And then come stage 3, he's got a tire off in the pit, or his car is going around, or he's having some sort of issue. So, Chris, is there anybody now that these numbers have moved that you're just like, I'm all set, and maybe you were a little more optimistic coming into the race?
Well, I bet Bell prior to qualifying just because I thought there was a good chance of him putting it on the pole or qualifying in the top 3.
Yep.
And, he's a starting fifth. It's going to be great. It'll be the tease all day long. He'll be at times. He'll be like for a 30-lap run, he'll be the most dominant car NASCAR has ever seen. And he'll do something just complete, like a penalty that you just don't see that often. It will happen to him. And so that's why it's always funny. I always say you can take Chris Bell and Denny Hamlin before the race, or you can take them when they go to the rear the first or the second time and get a better number.
Yep.
So those are your options.
Yeah. No,
I was just going to say, and that's funny you say that, because Kyle and I mention this quite often now. Like, Christopher Bell is the prime example of somebody that you kind of want to get in on the number early prior to practice and qualifying. And if you can flip it at a ticket market before the race, because his odds are going to shrink after the qualifying number, and you can just sell out of that outright and go for like a top 10 or like a matchup on him and get out of that losing bet early.
Yeah.
He's definitely not someone you want to have invested in matchups on, in my opinion. No. You want to take him into win bets because that's where the value lies. Just if he's going to be competitive or win a race, like that's where you want to get paid. You're not going to get paid on matchups with him because he has such a high beta. He could go from running third to all of a sudden 2 laps down instantly.
Yeah, his range of outcomes definitely takes wild swings throughout races, a lot like Eric Jones and Ricky Stenhouse, guys that Brian and I keep gravitating towards and wondering why every time. The next range is kind of interesting, Brian. Obviously, we talked a lot about Tyler Reddick coming into qualifying, and he's somebody obviously with the move to 2311 eventually is kind of garnering our interest. Obviously, had a win a couple weeks ago. His number it seems like it's faded a little bit. Wasn't it a little bit shorter? It was closer to like 20-25. So
yeah, I think it was like 20-25.
You can get a 30 on him. I kind of like that. Interesting to see Bubba at 30-35, obviously qualifying really well. Not sure I'm going to get there just because of his history at these similar tracks. And obviously good to see him perform, but another guy who, when it comes to stage 3, there's just often issues.
Mhm.
Are you gravitating towards anyone else, or we can even, obviously Suarez, another Team Trackhouse guy. We talk about his number. You can get a 40 and a 50 on him. That's pretty nice.
I mean, Reddick at 30-1 is not a terrible spot to get in on him. We did this earlier in the week. He was my best bet. I had him at a top 10 at -135 at FanDuel, which you could get a better number now because he didn't look that great, but I still have confidence that he can work his way up to inside the top 10 of the field. And he's the kind of guy, he's run near the front at a few different tracks that we didn't expect earlier on this season. So the number is right for me. Very small investment on him, though, as I don't necessarily know that he's going to be able to have the long run speed to stay up at the front.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And Chris, when it comes to someone like Reddick, who obviously will be changing teams, but not for a couple of years, how do you factor that in at all when you're thinking about taking him in outrights and matchups? Or is that just kind of something that, we'll adjust when his car adjusts and not really worry about that right now?
Yeah, that's tough without inside information on just kind of the culture of the team or kind of how everyone's kind of sitting. My deal with Reddick is, I mean, sometimes he disappears in races and it just kind of runs around in 17th, and it's, even though I think 30-1, I mean, I'd blindly take him almost at any track at 30-1 and just hope it's not one of those tracks where he just kind of, has slow pit stops and, just kind of rides around in 15th and then maybe finishes 12th, where he just never had a legit shot.
Yeah.
So
true.
that's where it's hard with Reddick, but you never know. I mean, he just had such a quiet practice, in my opinion, that it was just might be one of those races where I'd rather see him run really well and maybe grab a live price at 12 or 15-1 and say, hey, you know what? I can deal with this knowing he's fast, because sometimes he just disappears.
No, I think that's a great call. And I think live betting some of these drivers is a good move to kind of take advantage of, because, as you mentioned, there's certain drivers who you can tell pretty early when they have it or when they don't. And Reddick is one of those guys that when he's on, he looks great. But as you mentioned, sometimes he's inconsistent, and part of the reason why, we've, especially the last year or so, kind of just been barely like in playoff contention, and kind of been somebody that we wanted a little bit more from. So I think that is a great point. Is there any longer shots you're looking at, Chris, in terms of the outright market, or should we head over to kind of finishing position head to heads?
If there was someone I thought that maybe, and I didn't even realize his price was available, 70-1 on Brad Keselowski.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. At Richmond, I had a huge bet on Eric Jones over him, thinking that he was going to be trash, and he passed Eric Jones like he was standing still, and actually was kind of competitive. I remember live betting him at like 200-1 on Caesars, and I couldn't believe it. Now, turned out he wasn't anywhere near, didn't have that speed, but it was the first time he was actually passing cars. That would be the one that I would circle and maybe revisit and do a little research just to see. He was trash at Phoenix, but he was decent at Richmond. So that would be worth a nibble, if anything, but I don't think I'm going to invest in a win. He's not going to win the race. I don't see him driving through the field and winning. So, but a top 10 qualifying had to have been one of his best of the year on a non-plate, or, I don't know what his qualifying's been really this year. Kind of
It is actually only the third time all season he's qualified inside the top 10 at a non-restrictor plate track.
Yeah. It's been a rough year, so it is good for him. Good to see him. But I think
no, it's not.
Brian, despite he is your nemesis, I think keeping an eye on him, it could be a nice little look. Let's head over to DraftKings. Let's see what's going on here. Let's close this one. There we go.
While Kyle still finds this, I will say it was quite surprising to see RFK run where they did during practice and qualifying, as both him and Buescher looked pretty good. I know Buescher, he lost it. I think it was in corner 3 when he was making his qualifying lap, so he didn't get inside that top 10. But both of them looked pretty good. Keselowski, for what it's worth, he's looked good the last couple of weeks. It's just like a guy like him, every single week he's involved in one of the wrecks or causing the wreck. So it's hard to like bank on him early. I do like Chris's idea of, I mean, if he looks good, early on in the race, maybe you go in live with him at a little bit of a shorter number, even like 35 or 40 to 1, and then just hold it and hope that he can miraculously work his way to the front.
Yeah,
well, you'll know quickly.
Go ahead.
Sorry, you'll know quickly. I mean,
Yeah.
he qualified ninth. If he passes Larson and Almirola, I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
Those are two guys that I feel like. You pass Kyle Larson, I don't care if you're Brad Keselowski and you pass Kyle Larson, like that's the highlight of your year. So, I mean, you should probably go make a wager on him if he's going to pass Larson.
Yeah. And Almirola at this track, I think that's a great call. So
sure.
Keep an eye on him. He was somebody, especially last week, that I was all over in DFS and was feeling great about it until that last, third or whatever, and then he found his way into the infield, and his day was over. Let's look at these head-to-heads and see kind of as they've moved, Brian, see if we can't find some value still. As from before, I was on Reddick over Briscoe. I'm happy to be there. Almirola's $1.20. Kurt Busch, even money. Any interest, Brian?
I mean, 4 of the top 5 qualifiers were all Toyota, and Kurt Busch was the second fastest guy during qualifying. He was the second fastest guy in qualifying, but held that top spot for a really long time. I do not think it's that crazy to think that Kurt Busch finishes inside the top 5. The Toyotas looked great. We've talked about Busch before as being kind of that surprise performer each week, as being one of the fastest cars on track at a lot of different places. And I think we could see it again. I mean, anytime you get plus money at a guy at any kind of track, Almirola has good history, but doesn't really have, really good success this year. So, I mean, head to head at a different track, it's easy Kurt Busch. So getting plus money, even at a track where he hasn't been as good, I think is good value.
Speaking of plus money, let's look at the next one. Chris, I want to talk to you about William Byron, a guy that I'm kind of not optimistic about, and yet the price minus $2. I mean, he struggled at Richmond. He struggled at Phoenix. He hasn't traditionally been great on this style of a track. Am I missing something, or is this just...
Well, he wasn't traditionally good at Martinsville either, but he went out there and did well in the truck series, then went out there and dominated the cup race. So I'm hesitant. This was something I've talked about, a matchup I've talked about kind of throughout the entire week. And Bowman was a slight dog. And I think that if both of their cars are equal, I think Bowman's a lot better at taking a poor car and getting a good finish, whereas William Byron kind of relies on having a fast car, having a good setup, a good handling race car, and then he blows the doors off Bowman. So when I was kind of giving my analysis earlier in the week, I said, listen, I like Bowman just because he's plus 105, and I don't know what you're going to get with Byron. If they both unload average, Bowman wins. If Byron unloads good, he's going to destroy Bowman. So I think that there's a underestimated advantage or overlooked advantage of running Xfinity and Cup, or running Xfinity or trucks before Cup race. I mean, they just have an advantage kind of right away. Instead of, kind of learning about the track, they're able to kind of get some track position, maybe make some passes early in a run to start. And that's huge. If you can pick up 4 or 5 spots in the first run and you feel comfortable, you're already kind of one step ahead on your adjustments. You know what your car needs more. And I'm not saying Byron should be minus 200. I mean, if I had to pick this, I'm taking Bowman. Yeah. If I had to pick this, just because Byron doesn't have in my opinion, a top 5 car. So not that I think Bowman's good, but that 170. I mean, I'm not taking Byron at minus $2. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I took so from earlier in the week, I do have my Byron. I do have Bowman over Byron at plus 110. Might go back to it, Brian, just because of that number, plus 170. Obviously, Byron qualified much better and looked pretty good, but I definitely don't trust him quite as much. And we were talking about the Xfinity race and kind of just the feel of the track and how it was a little bumpy, and maybe Byron being out there a little bit and just kind of getting a little more comfortable.
True. Yeah.
Could be the difference maker. But yeah, I mean, it's probably going to come down to those cars, as Chris mentioned. So I think that is an interesting thing. I could see, when I see two drivers that I think are reasonably even most weeks, and I can get a big plus money on them. I tend to lean that way and figure it out later. We can keep it rolling. Brian, Ross Chastain at plus 100 over Denny Hamlin. You like him in the outright. You like him quite a bit. That's an interesting number.
Already being added to the card as we speak. Chastain looked better during practice and qualifying. I'm going to play this up for as long as possible until Denny Hamlin gets his revenge here. Yep. It'll be interesting to see when that happens. And in all likelihood, like you said earlier on in the week, it's going to be when we have a bunch of outrights on Chastain for big money. So
I'm telling you, man, we're going to be sitting there with our our championship ticket. It's going to be the final race of the season, and Hambone's going to send Ross around, and we're going to be throwing watermelons at Danny's tractor. Chris, is this a good spot to attack Kyle Busch? I know he's starting a little bit back, but the books like him. Outright market still has him priced up, and you can get him against Ryan Blaney at basically even money.
Yes.
yes. This is the way to get some money, get some advantage on Kyle Busch.
Yeah, it's so interesting when you see the matchups like that, when the guys are priced so similarly on the outright market, and you see one of them being like plus money. Those to me are like the biggest indications as like you need to be taking the person with plus money in this matchup when they're priced so close together on an outright.
Yeah. Well, Blaney qualified so well at Richmond and Phoenix by polling at both races. And here's the thing, Blaney doesn't work his way through traffic very well. So he needs to have that good qualifying to kind of stay in the top 5. And remember, when you're kind of back there, I mean, he qualified 11th, which for him is terrible qualifying, in my opinion. Yeah. He's going to kind of have I'm not saying he's going to have a bad pit stall, but if you're kind of losing spots on pit road all day, he does not pass cars as well as Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch could lose 5 or 6 spots on pit road, which will not happen. But if he did, he can pass those cars in 10 or 12 laps, and he might bitch and moan on the radio, but he's still going to get it done. Whereas Blaney kind of stays back there.
Yeah. And Blaney is a guy who already has issues in the pits and has issues elsewhere too. So if he's starting farther back, he's having issues passing people. And then he, in stage 3 is having a slow pit stop. That all spells disaster. So yeah, I think this is a great opportunity to jump on Kyle Busch at a really, really nice number. We'll keep it rolling. Brian, I know Martin Truex qualified on the pole, but Kyle Larson, we liked him coming into the week. We can now get even money on him against Truex. Do we dare fade the Marty party, or is this a good spot to just kind of back off and move elsewhere?
I mean, Truex looked fantastic. I have a lot more faith in Larson to finish the race than I do Truex, but I'd prefer to just stick with an outright with Larson. To me, you're getting a lot more value especially because we grabbed it early on in the week and then see how they're doing during the race. The matchup that really caught my eye right there is the one right above that. Austin Cindric at plus over $2 against Eric Almirola. I know Almirola has a lot longer history at this track, with this only being Cindric's first like full season in the Cup Series, but knowing that Cindric is probably driving a little bit better equipment, in my opinion, for Penske, although they didn't look that good, they didn't qualify that great. That number seems pretty inflated. I don't know. I kind of wanted to get your guys' opinion on that, because to me that seems like something, even for a small bet, makes too much sense.
You have any thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, I think that Almirola is overvalued just in general this week. I mean, he won last year. He was 60-1 last year before the race. But the thing is last year he actually looked a lot better in Phoenix and in Richmond than he did this year. So I mean, I wasn't high on Almirola. I talked about it on my podcast as to why. And listen, he looked good in practice, but I mean, 255. I mean, I don't lay that unless it's Almirola against, BJ McLeod. I mean, then you're just looking at like, hey, the only time I lay that is when I'm looking at if this guy just stays on the track, will he beat him? Yeah. And Eric Almirola, if he stays on the track, might not necessarily beat Austin Cindric. I mean, I'm not rushing to bet Cindric. It was pretty piss poor qualifying. He's not good on high wear tracks, especially in the Cup car relative to Xfinity car. This is not a road course. He's been running hot because of the specific tracks that we've had.
Mm-hmm.
So I would probably just stay away. If you're going to take a side, you're taking Austin Cindric, but I'm not interested there.
Yeah, and I just like I took Almirola in a couple like head to heads and positions last week, Brian, and he's just a guy that I trust to finish kind of 7th to 12th and kind of just be fine. Like I don't think he's gonna pop up and win. I don't think he's gonna finish 32nd. I think he'll kind of be in that mid cluster. And Cindric's got a wider range of outcomes. Obviously, that number is really nice. And like Chris said, if it's a bet either way. Cindric's definitely the number, but I'm probably fading it. We talked a little bit about Keselowski and kind of his potential. Plus 105 against Bubba, a guy who doesn't traditionally do well here. Are we interested in jumping in there, Chris, or do you need to see him on the track before you feel comfortable, even when it comes to something like a head-to-head?
This is a driver I don't trust versus a car I don't trust. And I don't know who I trust less.
Yeah.
I think right now, if anything goes wrong in Bubba's race, he's going to lose his mind. And he'd be lucky to finish. He's just got such a short fuse, and probably for good reason. But I mean, if anyone, I'm taking Keselowski there. I just don't trust Bubba Wallace yet. I'd rather lose money and say, hey, you know what? I was wrong about Bubba instead of backing him. I mean, yeah, like I said, it's a driver I don't trust in Bubba and a car I don't trust in Brad.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating thing with Bubba, because you can see his ceiling, you can see his potential, but he definitely has that, like he's in his own head far too often. What was the race a few weeks ago,
Nashville.
Ryan? Yeah, Nashville, where they had the rain delay, and all of a sudden he's just like able to focus again, and he was able to finish strong. And just the consistently being out there doing laps, things don't go perfectly. He kind of starts to melt down a little bit, and that's not really something you want to back, especially on something like a head-to-head. Like I feel like if I'm going to shoot for Bubba to be running really strongly and be able to put it all together, I'm going to go for outrights. I'm not going to go for head-to-heads and expect him to beat another driver straight up. Here's another cluster, Brian. I'm just kind of running through the matchups. Is there anything specific you want to jump on, any numbers that really make sense to you, maybe right here?
I mean, just for like personal reasons, I wouldn't mind going in on Hamlin over Logano, but I mean, I feel like they're too evenly matched. Hamlin didn't really look great today. He didn't look comfortable in his car. I mean, I'm sure they'll make plenty of adjustments, and with the rest of the Toyotas looking as good as they did, I think they should kind of turn it around. But traditionally, Fords have been fantastic here, so I feel like with less adjustments, Logano's car could be just as good as Hamlin. So I don't know if that one makes any sense. And then like Byron versus Christopher Bell, I don't trust Bell enough to finish ahead of Byron to go there. And then kind of the way that Chris was mentioning with William Byron, again, like if he's not running near the front, his car's not great. Bell could accidentally finish ahead of him. So I don't really like either one of those matchups.
If he has his penalty early versus late in the race, he'll beat him.
Yeah, exactly.
But if it's late, you got no chance.
We can look at some stage 1, stage 2 matchups for Christopher Bell and pound him there, and then avoid him in stage 3. Let's flip over and look over on Caesars, because they do have top Toyota, top Chevy, top Ford. Chris, is there any manufacturer bets that you're looking at this week, or numbers that you've seen that kind of make some sense?
No, here's the thing. I kind of threw out kind of the history just with the new car.
Yeah.
We don't know what to expect. It's really easy to say that the Fords have been dominant and the Chevys have been terrible, but this is a new car and we've seen some surprising things this year. So I'm not going to look at history. I just want to use my eyeballs and lap times from practice to make any decisions when it comes to this. I did think that the Toyotas were pretty good. I think it's really tough to figure out who the best Toyota is going to be. I think if you're going to, this is where there might be value. Well, I think Kyle Busch is going to be really good.
Yeah.
So I don't want to I was gonna say maybe back Chris Bell here, but no, I think Kyle and also Truex. Listen, he's got the first pit stall. He's gonna have to fade a lot in order to not finish in the top 10, in my opinion. He's gonna have to have an issue because that first pit stall is so important. And it's not like he hasn't had speed. Whenever he's been in kind of the top 5, he's run top 5 lap times and been competitive. So I don't really see anything there. I mean, yeah,
How do you
I don't know.
About the Fords? Because I mean, when you look at the Ford board, they got Logano and Blaney at the top of the board, but Harvick and Almirola are like the 2 most recent guys with the most success here. Chase Briscoe was on a lot of people's kind of like sleeper list for this race, and then Brad Keselowski is somebody who, like you were saying, he has the potential to perform well. He qualified really well, sitting at 9-1. Do you have any interest in going in at Keselowski and maybe 9-1 to just top Ford as opposed to going a matchup or like a placement finish?
Yeah, I think that's actually might be a decent bet because I only think that of the guys that I really think are top 5 cars, I really only think Harvick is a top 5 Ford. So other than that, the next one could kind of be a toss-up on whether that's Brad Keselowski or Logano. I can't imagine Blaney's gonna be, not hang around in like that 7 first. So that might be a good. I was kind of shocked at how poorly Briscoe qualified after he was the guy that have to shift. And I mean, he just kind of screwed the pooch in qualifying. And man, I thought he looked decent in practice too. I was watching his lap times. I was kind of listening to his radio going, hey, this guy, I know that there were people on Twitter that fired on Briscoe after the first few minutes of practice when someone left some odds up. And I thought that they were going to get good. There was going to be value there because I thought he was going to qualify well, and then laid a complete egg. And it's going to be hard for him to work his way back up to the field. I'm out on Briscoe. I just don't see him just charging through this field at this track.
Yep. I agree there. And I have my Reddick. I could see myself getting back to him in that matchup. This might be a good spot to get Harvick, Brian. I like the plus 340. And if I don't need him to top 5 here. I can just need him to be in front of all these other guys. We talked about our issues with Blaney. We talked about our thoughts with Almirola, with Briscoe. Obviously, Keselowski's number is kind of nice if you want to take a longer shot, taking him at 9-1. But it's really, for me, this is kind of a battle versus Joey Logano. And Logano has his ups, he also has his downs. So getting plus 340 in a race that I feel like is going to be more of a matchup, I don't hate going there, and I've actually added it to the betting card. Bubba at 16-1, starting where he is. I know he's frustrated.
No chance.
Yeah, no, that's probably the move.
Take him to win if that's the case.
Exactly.
Like, if you think he's gonna be top Toyota, take him to win.
Yeah.
Or top 3, because he's gonna have to do that in order to beat those guys.
Yep. No, I think that makes sense.
I definitely don't mind right there. Right as you close that up there, Chastain top Chevrolet. I think it was like plus 850. He's a guy who I could see running in the top.
Wait, pull that. Can you pull that back up? Oh, okay. I'm like plus 850.
Yeah, no, that
okay.
Plus 850, we would be hammering that, but no.
Even Chastain at plus 550.
That is pretty nice.
I agree.
That's a great
I don't think.
number.
Listen, I thought Larson was decent. I think he just qualified well. If you listen to his comments, he's like, I was shocked we qualified where we did. So, and that's kind of been the story with Chase. He's kind of had, the golden horseshoe. I don't know if you guys still watch NASCAR what Harvick was talking about, the golden horseshoe, or was it Johnson? It was Johnson and Harvick talking about someone having a golden horseshoe up their ass. I feel like that's been Chase Elliott this year. I mean, he just in the right place at the right time. He wins at Nashville because he takes tires, and then there's a long run, and he works his way in the top 3. That solidifies his track position. Then he goes on to block Corey LaJoie. If it was anyone else blocking Corey LaJoie, they get crucified after the race. But no, since it's Chase Elliott. Oh
Thank you. I am so glad I'm not the only person that thought that LaJoie should have just like ran right through him. I don't.
Oh, of course he should have, and he should have acted like this is almost like like at Bristol when Hamlin ended up beating the guy. He's in the truck series now. He doesn't have a ride. He was with the Wood brothers.
DiBenedetto.
Yeah, De Benedetto.
Yeah.
It was almost like they're just so happy to be there. It's like, no,
right?
like you should have won the damn race. Like, don't go up there and shake his hand in victory lane. Smack him.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
hey, you do that again, I'm gonna put your ass in the wall.
Yeah, and I think that is the interesting thing with there's clearly tiers and levels, and drivers who have been there, like Ross Chastain isn't dealing with that. Kyle Busch is not dealing with that, but they've earned that level. And also, it was Atlanta; it was a home track. They had NBC had a crew in Dawsonville for Chase Elliott with all his family and stuff. Like it was like made for TV, so everybody's excited and they're all happy. And I think if there's other names involved, if say Chastain did that to Denny Hamlin, we would be hearing a different story.
Could you imagine?
So okay, well, I think we have hit all the names. We've ran through a lot of great stuff. Brian, we have one thing left to do. We got to hit everybody with our best bets, and we'll let Chris take the lead here. Chris, if you had to make one bet with the numbers as they currently stand, where's your hard-earned dollars going?
Kevin Harvick to win. Kevin Harvick will win tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay.
That is my bet. I've been saying it. Like I mean, I know that Childers has said he actually liked a tweet of mine. I feel famous now when I'm saying that, like, hey, these are the reasons why I thought he was going to be good. And then Childers said the same thing in an interview. And you still need to unload with speed. Now, if he had not unloaded with speed, I would be saying something else. But even after qualifying, his quote on PRN, I happen to be listening. Qualify well, and he hasn't said that all year. He's been terrible in practice most weeks. And so I'm going to go with Kevin Harvick. I have him at 25-1 and 20-1. And that's my best bet of the week.
Love it. Love it. Spicy. I think that's an awesome way to go. Brian, I saw you just added yours to the card. Let me know what your best bet for the Ambetter 301 is going to be.
Well, it's going to be the last thing that that caught my eye that I mentioned. That's going to be Ross Chastain to finish as the top Chevrolet at plus 550. I feel like that number is too good of a value to pass up for a guy that I have on an outright already at 15-1. Dude is he has the most top 5 finishes this year. He's finished inside the top 8, I think, in like 7 of the last 8 races. Chastain for me is like the most aggressive guy in terms of taking a win. And I feel like if anybody's going to do that this week, it's going to be him. So give me him over Larson and Elliott and the rest of the Chevy crew.
I like it. And obviously you have your top 10 on Reddick from prior to qualifying. My best bet prior to qualifying was Bowman over Byron. I'm actually going to add that at the plus 170 because if I'm right, then I will want a little piece of it at a much better number. But my best bet is going to be the one that kind of jumped out when we were running through the matchups, and that was Kyle Busch over Ryan Blaney. That number made me scratch my head, made me stop and pause, and I think there's a lot of value there. Even with Busch starting near the back, I just trust him to find his way forward, find his way near the front, and finish really strong in this race. So I am going to add that for 3 units. Brian, you added 3 units on your Chastain because you are getting spicy this week. Chris, thank you so much for joining us and hopping on. And
hey, no problem.
Talking. Anytime. Tell everybody where they can find your pod and all that good stuff.
Okay, yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Chris Werme 15, ChrisWerme 15. You can follow the podcast, follow Bet the Board Pod, and I'm with Todd Fuhrman, and if you just look for the Stay Green, that's the name of the podcast that we do together. It's every Friday morning it releases, and we usually shoot it on Wednesday evenings. So if anything changes, that's why it just gets released on Friday morning. Yeah, just give Todd a follow, give myself a follow, and Bet the Board Pod a follow.
Yeah, we're worth your time. Add it to your NASCAR rotation. We'll make sure to share that around at FPAOP on Twitter. We'll also drop it down in the show notes here on YouTube, so make sure you check that out. For Chris Werme, for Brian Twining, I'm Kyle Robert, and you guys enjoy the race. And we're back talking DraftKings. We had a great conversation with Chris Werme talking our bets, getting you ready for the Ambetter 301 on the betting board. We didn't forget about DraftKings, just mixed up the show a little bit this week. So, Brian, let's get into it and show the people what we're doing over on DraftKings. We'll start like we always do. We'll run through the board. We'll find some names that we like this week with some names that maybe we're avoiding at their cost and see what we can do in terms of DraftKings. Obviously, it'll fluctuate a little bit from our betting, but we'll start at the top of the board where we have some serious value, including Kyle Busch at 11,000. He's expensive, but if you got through the stuff with the betting, you know exactly how we feel about him. Makes a lot of sense. Should move up, should be very popular, and at 11,000, he'll make some tough decisions for you later in your lineup, but I think he is worthwhile there. 4 names, including Joey Logano, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex, and Chase Elliott, all in that 10K range. Actually, Ryan Blaney's in there too. So in that 10K range, what are you thinking about? And if you go Kyle Busch, do you think we can get 2 of these kind of guys in?
I mean, Kyle Busch is probably going to be the most popular guy. It's a lot of money, but starting where he is, knowing how good he is here, if you watch the betting part of this show, you see where he is on the odds board. He's like the second favorite or still the third favorite to win this race. I think he's probably the best value among all of those guys. But if you do squeeze him in there, I think you're going to have to go a little bit cheaper with guys that are starting near the front and hope that they stay there, just because it may be, 20, 30 laps before Busch is able to work his way up there. And knowing that we're getting 301 laps here, laps led is going to play a major factor in this race for getting that dominator. And it'll be whether or not Busch can get there quickly, or if it's going to be kind of a whole day's worth of work for him to get to the front.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a double dominator kind of day. Obviously, you want movement points, you want all that other stuff. But yeah, I think finding a way to squeeze 2 guys in. If we do fade Kyle Busch, we just cross him off. We go down because he is going to be popular, especially as we build these for GPPs. Is who would be your first name in at the top of the board? Is it somebody in the 10K range?
I'm personally, you saw who I have on an outright. You saw my best bet. If you're not going Kyle Busch, I feel like the next best spot to get in on is Chastain starting 18th at 9,800. I mean, you're saving, $1,300 there, getting a guy starting right near where Busch is with the same potential as Kyle Busch. And then you're able to even maybe go back to the top and add a Truex or add a Elliott there. So for me, it's one of those 2. It's either Busch or Chastain.
Yeah, I think like a Elliott Chastain combo would be really fun, really, really easy start. I do wonder if Hamlin is kind of sneaky. We saw how well a lot of the Toyotas ran. Obviously, Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin weren't a part of that group, but literally all the other Toyotas were, 4 of the top 5 spots. I wonder if they get some intel and kind of figure some stuff out between qualifying and race day. So I think Hamlin could be a nice little pivot too, but I'm with you. Chastain is incredibly compelling.
One thing I do want to say about Denny Hamlin that I feel like a lot of people are missing on is the fact that he only has 4 top 10s all season. It's not like this is the same guy that's been running as good as we've seen. And like Phoenix, he wasn't the greatest. He finished 13th. Richmond, he won the race at Richmond, but I mean, Phoenix, he didn't look good. So it's like, which car are you getting there? And then you heard Chris talk about like he's not really factoring Gateway too much, but Hamlin finished 34th at Gateway. I mean, again, like JGR has been all over the map this year, and Hamlin has not been as consistently good as we've seen in years past. So it's what car are you getting there? So it's a little bit riskier going to him.
Yeah, and some of his finishes have been a result of his driving. Some of them have been a result of other people's driving, namely our friend Ross Chastain. So, it's been a wild ride. Even what was it a few weeks ago where he was running great, and then he got spun out, and then he ended up getting back on the track and look, he was going to do it again, and then he had another incident. So he's been in a precarious position most of the year. The next range gets really interesting because we have Kyle Larson, William Byron, and Christopher Bell, somebody who we really like, all kind of starting near the front in that like 9K range. We'll even drop down into the 8 range with Harvick, Reddick, Briscoe, Kurt Busch, and Almirola. We talked a little bit with Chris about his excitement for Kevin Harvick, but I guess in that range, from Larson all the way down to Almirola, what are your thoughts? Anyone in there jumping out to you as somebody you want to target?
I loved Reddick to start the week. I mean, Chris kind of scared me off a little bit there. He just kind of like he brought it to my attention. Like Reddick he kind of disappeared during practice. He was just kind of running his laps, and he didn't look great during qualifying. And he's done that a few times at races. I still like him to potentially top 10, but I don't think you're going to get that that boom performance. Harvick at 8,800 is a little bit worrisome for me. I don't know, obviously a lot of sharps are going to be in on him, but I just haven't seen it with him finishing inside like that top 3 spot, which is kind of what you need for a top 10 start. Like for me, Larson, no matter what he thinks about his car, he's not as good as he was last year, but in terms of a racer in the Cup Series that has the ability to adjust on the fly and finish with a bad car, I think Kyle Larson's probably the best of anybody on the roster right now. So I think him starting 8th at 9,600 is kind of a good point to get on him, because you don't normally see him with that low a salary.
Yeah, and I think fading William Byron starting 6, like I'm just fading him in general across the board. Like I don't trust him this week. I know when he's at his best, he can win any race, and maybe I'll look silly for fading him, but
same thing with Christopher Bell.
I'm either going up to Larson or down to Bell, and Bell is terrifying because he could be looking great for into stage 3 and then all of a sudden having issues. So
it's too bad you can't like the same thing in like DraftKings with like betting markets where you could sell off tickets. You could start with Bell in your lineup and say he leads like the first 40 laps, and then sell him for like gained salary or something.
Yeah,
or
do some like showdown lineups for like stage 1, stage 2, and then not use them in stage 3. That's kind of our general premise for him. Let's fade down into the 7K range. Alex Bowman starting 27th at 7,800 is interesting. And even Austin Cindric starting 28th. Austin Cindric obviously not great at these style of races, but starting 28th, he could make some noise early and give you a borderline top 10 finish, and maybe that's enough at 7,600 to kind of get you there. But I think all 3 of these guys are compelling options based on where they're starting and their potential to move through the field. I want no part of Bubba starting 4th. He worries me too much. Not. Eric Jones, Allmendinger kind of round out the 7K range. Is there anyone in the 7K range you like, or should we keep moving?
I mean, I like Cindric in a couple of matchups, but it's just hard with him because he really doesn't have any history at this track in like Cup Series. And then starting 28th, Ford's looked pretty good, but 7,600 is a little bit much for where he's starting. I'd prefer that to be closer to the 7K range. And then Allmendinger 20th, it's just the car hasn't been good enough for me. I think like ceiling for him is probably a 15th, which is okay, but it's not what you want out of somebody starting where he is.
Yep. We'll dip into the 6K range. I think there's going to be some potential. We'll even go down to 5K just because, or actually, let's just do 6K. Keselowski starting 9th. We talked about him a little bit. Might be better outright bet than a DraftKings play. He is starting 9th. He has the potential to pop, but he also has the potential to spin around, end up in the grass, and be out of the race. So he is a little concerning. Ricky Stenhouse starting 24th at 6,700. Speaking of guys that can pop or spin around and end up in the field. Michael McDowell starting 15th. Austin Dillon starting 30th at 6,300 is kind of interesting. And then your guy, Christopher Buescher, 16th, 6,100. Any interest there?
I mean, historically, Buescher hasn't run well here at all. But I mean, we've talked about this at length. The new car, just the new season, it's completely turned all that previous stuff on its head. Buescher has looked a lot better than what his past successes or lack thereof have been this year. He ran really well in practice. He was right on the cusp of getting inside that top 10 qualifying mark. So I think that 16th starting position is a little bit deceiving for the group that he ran in. So, I mean, there's definitely value at 6,100, but you're just hoping that he maintains. And I don't really see him as being a guy that's going to move up very much. So I don't think there's enough like potential boom out of that spot. Like I'd prefer to go down the board a little bit further with somebody that I bet earlier this week who also didn't look that good during qualifying.
Yeah. Austin Dillon is interesting. He started 13th at Phoenix. He obviously finished 21st, which is not great. But he was 10th after stage 1 and 9th after stage 2. And actually ran a pretty decent race. I think Phoenix is a great comp for New Hampshire this week with the new car. So I think he is somebody that kind of jumped out to me a little bit. But yeah, you're obviously going to have to find a little bit of value here. But man, it does get a little intimidating. Ty Dillon actually had a decent run at Phoenix, starting 21st, ended up finishing 15th, finishing pretty strong. So he's another guy that if we start really aggressively at the top, you hit him at 35th, and then you kind of hope he can kind of finish or top 20-ish. I do worry though with so many laps that some of these cars end up 1-2 multiple laps behind and really tank your DraftKings lineup. So that is also something to be concerned about. So Brian, Cole Custer, 50.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. So Cole Custer for me, you saw it earlier in the week. I got that top 10 at plus 850. It's actually a little bit better now that he didn't qualify very well. But knowing that the SHR team, like Almirola and Kevin Harvick, both ran really well in practice. Harvick qualified inside the top 10. Harvick, you heard Chris talk about him like that's his pick to win. That's his pick to win the race. So he's definitely picking the brain of Harvick's team as to how to improve here. Custer ran 16th at Phoenix, 22nd at Richmond. He's finished 8th and 14th at New Hampshire in the past. He ran here pretty well in the Xfinity Series. I think his practice time was, like the 12th or 13th overall fastest. Qualifying, he missed a couple of the turns, so his speed got reduced there, so he didn't qualify very well. But I think Custer's a guy that if he can find his groove and just like maintain early on, a 15th or 16th place finish floor is a possibility for him, and moving up even 8 spots at 5,800, like that's a great value.
Yeah, I think he's a sneaky play, and I think something I'm glad we gravitated towards. As you mentioned, started at Dover, started 30th at Dover, ended up finishing 15th.
He actually has an average finish of 11.5 in his last 4 trips to Dover too, which is very similar to
25th, ended up finishing 16th, obviously starting 23rd here. If you get a top 15-ish finish for Cole Custer starting 23rd at 5,800, that could be a really, really nice value and someone that I'm not sure a lot of people are going to gravitate towards, honestly. But and when you're trying to save money with some of the elite options, he could be really, really nice. So, Brian, let's do it. Let's build a lineup. Let's see if we can't keep our nice little consecutive weeks of decent runs going. Let's keep everyone on the track, all 4 wheels down, all that good stuff. So, I will give you the keys. I will give you the tee. Who do you want first in our lineup?
The pressure.
I mean, we could just go Kyle Busch, Ross Chastain, and figure out the rest of it.
I mean, this is GPP. Let's throw both of those guys in there and let's just see what we can make of this thing, because I do like both of them to potentially compete for a win here.
Okay, well, we'll
love it. This is great.
Christopher Buescher did qualify on Austin Dillon. I could find myself gravitating towards. Brad Keselowski. We could go up a little bit.
I mean, I think the Alex Bowman call at 27th, like he's the kind of guy that could easily finish inside the top 15 from that starting position.
Yep. And then we have about $8K per driver the rest of the way. Obviously, we don't need to spend all of it, so let's not do that. Suarez starting 19th at 7,900 is interesting, but then we'd have to dive down. So let's see if we can find our cheap option and figure out what we may or may not have left. So Dylan starting 30th, Buescher starting 16th. Although we do want to try and find people who could lead laps. So we might.
I was just gonna say, like, I don't know, like we're gonna be punting on stage 1 here, if just by the looks of it.
Dare we go Bubba and hope he can win? Hopefully he can get to the front. Because
I don't know if Bubba can maintain though. Like that's the thing. But Bubba Wallace is so crazy that he could be running first and have a tire issue and just quit during the race. Like,
so let's find a way around this, because I think we're gonna have to pivot a little bit, just because we don't want to load up completely from the back. So I think the names that make sense: Kurt Busch starting 3rd at 8,200, Christopher Bell starting 5th at 9,100. Do we want to go, if we don't go Bubba, do we want to go Christopher Bell and see if what we can do from there? Or do we
honestly, I would prefer to go Kurt Busch. I have more faith in Kurt Busch to stay on the track, and his team has had far less issues in the pit road than Christopher Bell has.
I know you hate him with all that is your fandom, but Brad Keselowski starting 9th. We like him a little bit. Chris talked about, at his best can be really good here. Obviously has his known issues, but starting 9th, he could, Kurt Busch, this could be the race of the old guys, and Kurt Busch, and at least for the first couple stages, have a chance to lead some laps, dominate some of the race. We could also look to
the only thing I worry about with Keselowski is the fact that he only has 2 top 10s total on the season.
Yeah. No, he's terrifying.
One of them
for
came
a reason.
at Daytona.
Okay. So we have 74. We could just go Kurt Busch and then hope either Ross or Kyle can get there by end of stage 1, early stage 2, which I feel is completely plausible and not really stress too much about where we're at. I mean, the only other name that we could squeeze in is Bubba, but I think we both kind of want to avoid that. Yeah. So what name sub 7,400 do you want to go to? Because I think Austin Dillon is interesting. I think Christopher Buescher is fine. I think Ty Dillon is not the worst.
So Austin Dillon, he's never really performed well here, but I mean, you're just hoping for like a floor of 20th or so, like 22nd. Yeah.
But like I said, he's done decently at Phoenix. He did. Let's see where I was just looking at it. He started 13th. He ended up finishing 21st. But like I said, he was top 10, stage 1, stage 2. And then in Dover, he started 24th, finished 23rd. Not what you're looking for. Corey LaJoy, do we go back and hope he gets some of the magic from last week?
I don't know if you could bank on him performing like that 2 weeks in a row.
No, that's fair. Justin Haley, he started 14th and finished 11th at Dover. Where was he at? He started 28th, finished 17th at Phoenix. He is starting 25th. Maybe we get like a top 15 out of him and call it a day. The other option we could do is throw either one of Busch or Chastain back and see if we like the team better.
Honestly, I was going to say, looking at the numbers, like Austin Dillon is a lot more enticing than I thought he was going to be. He ran pretty well in Phoenix until he crashed. He finished 10th at Richmond.
Yeah.
He did okay at Gateway, starting 29th, finishing 15th. And he only has one finish worse than 22nd at New Hampshire, which, I mean, that's not where you want him to finish, but eight spots at 6,300 is more than enough to kind of suffice for that salary.
Yeah, and if he starts 30th, he flirts with a top 10, 15 finish. We're loving life. So I think that is the move. Obviously, you can finagle this how you see fit. These are some of the names we really like this week. You can always throw one of these guys back to be a little different. Get like a Kyle Larson at 9,600. I mean, you could. There's a lot you could do. I mean, just take Chastain out, put him in, and call it a day. But I like this lineup. I think it's going to be fun. I think it could be interesting. Obviously, some lineups you go heavier on the dominator. Some lineups you want to go heavier on finishing position guys, and then ideally you can find a combo that works well of the two. We will save this lineup. I will enter it into the contest. If you are enjoying the show, if you enjoyed what we did, if you made it through this far, we really appreciate you doing so. Make sure you give Chris a follow. Make sure you check out the Bet the Board podcast for NASCAR, as well as their other content. It's absolutely electric and great for sports betting. I'll put all that information down in the show notes below. Make sure you're following Brian Twining at Greasy Rules 14. Follow me at Notorious KRO. Enjoy the race. Cash some tickets. Win on DK. And we'll talk to you guys next week.